Lily grew up in a remote village, surrounded by mountains and endless rice fields. Her life was simple days spent helping her father in the fields, and nights listening to the wind outside their wooden house. But deep inside, Lily dreamed of more. She wanted to study, to explore the world beyond the hills, to build a future on her own terms. One evening, everything changed. Her father came home looking defeated, holding a piece of paper with shaking hands. "You're getting married, Lily," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. She froze. The groom was Ethan, a boy from the village. He was quiet, kept to himself, always seen wearing worn-out clothes and working odd jobs to survive. People whispered that he had no family, no money, no future. Lily cried, Tree begged. She shouted, but none of it mattered. Her father owed money, and this was his way out. The wedding was held the next Saturday, beneath a cloudy sky. There was no music, no laughter. Just a few neighbors gathered, watching in silence as the ceremony began. Lily wore a simple white dress sewn by her aunt. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her face remained blank. Ethan stood beside her, calm and unreadable. When the village elder told them to hold hands, she hesitated. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled. But then she saw her father, standing alone in the crowd, ashamed and broken. She slowly reached out. Ethan's hand was rough but warm, and steady. After the ceremony, they walked together to a small wooden house at the top of a hill. It was quiet, with peeling paint and a single lantern hanging by the door. This was their new home. Ethan opened the door and spoke, his voice low and careful. "You can have the bedroom. I'll sleep on the porch. Don't be afraid. I won't bother you." Lily said nothing. She stepped inside, looked around at the bare walls and the tiny bed, and sat down. That night, she cried silently under the thin blanket. To her, it felt like the end of everything she had ever hoped for. But what she didn't know was that this was not the end of her dreams. It was just the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The days that followed the wedding were wrapped in silence, as if even the wind respected the space between them. Lily moved through the tiny wooden house like a ghost, quiet, cautious, distant. She washed the dishes without making a sound and sat by the window for hours, staring at the fields stretching out beyond the hills. Ethan never forced a conversation. Every morning, he left quietly to work. His footsteps faded with the mist, and by the time she awoke, he was already gone. He returned after sundown, sometimes limping from exhaustion, sometimes with dirt still clinging to his clothes. But always, he'd bring something back: fresh vegetables, a handful of rice, or sometimes wildflowers that he'd leave on the windowsill without a word. Lily pretended not to notice, but her heart did. The house itself was humble. Creaky wooden floors, a table that leaned to one side, and a single bed that Lily claimed without protest. Ethan, true to his word, made the porch his sleeping space. One stormy night, thunder shook the walls, and Lily couldn't sleep. She tiptoed to the window and peeked through the curtain. There he was, soaked, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, shivering in his sleep. Her stomach turned. Something about the sight made her feel strange. Guilty, grateful. She didn't know. The next morning, she boiled water and poured it into a chipped ceramic cup. She opened the door and placed it gently on the step. No words, no eye contact. Later, the cup was gone. That day, he fixed the leaking roof. The next, he mended the loose floorboard. By the end of the week, he had built a small wooden table from leftover planks. He didn't ask her to join, but he began leaving 2 bowls instead of 1. At first, she didn't sit. But then, one evening, she did. They ate together in silence. Every small act felt like a question he never asked. But she slowly began answering without speaking. One afternoon, she followed him with her eyes as he walked toward the tree at the edge of the field. She hesitated, then, quietly, joined him. They sat under the tree, their backs against the trunk, the sun warming their faces. Still, no words. But she noticed how his shoulders relaxed beside hers. That night, she offered him the floor inside. Blind. She didn't insist. But she left the door unlocked. Small things. She started placing wildflowers in a jar by the window. He began coming home earlier. She began humming softly while cleaning. He swept the yard before she could. Something unseen began blooming in the quiet. Not love, not yet. But trust. A silent bond, growing stronger with every shared glance. Every bowl of rice, every quiet evening spent beneath the same roof. And for the first time, as Lily drifted to sleep that night, she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered to herself in the dark, "Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's something else." She didn't know what that something was. But for the first time since the wedding, she wanted to find out. It was a morning like any other. Lily tied her hair into a low braid and swept the floor. But something felt different. She turned to find Ethan carefully repairing one of her broken sandals. Sitting on the porch, his hands worked slowly, gently threading the strap with quiet focus. He didn't see her watching him. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his expression serious, almost soft. When he noticed her gaze, he stood up awkwardly and extended the sandal toward her without a word. "Thank you," she whispered, almost surprised at the sound of her own voice. It was the first time she had spoken to him since their wedding. He nodded, smiled faintly, then returned to sweeping the porch. From that day on, the air between them began to shift. He started leaving small surprises in unexpected places. A ripe mango on the kitchen table. A folded blanket at the edge of her bed. A book she'd once mentioned left by the window. Lily found herself noticing things he hadn't before. How he gently placed things down, instead of dropping them. How he always checked if the door was locked before going to sleep. One afternoon, she was washing clothes by the stream when her fingers slipped on a rock. Scraping her palm open, she winced in pain, blood pooling quickly. Before she could react, Ethan was already there. He had been nearby collecting firewood. He pulled a cloth from his pocket, wrapped her hand without asking, and tied it with surprising care. "You need to be more careful," he said softly, his voice barely louder than the breeze. Lily looked at him. For the first time, she saw him not just the boy she had been forced to marry, but the man behind the silence. And something inside her softened. That evening, she made soup her mother's old recipe and served 2 bowls without hesitation. They ate at the table, candlelight flickering between them. "It's good," he said, after a few bites. She smiled, shyly. Later that night, she heard movement outside. Peeking through the window, she saw him placing new straw on the porch floor. Adjusting his blanket to make it more comfortable, she opened the door. "You don't have to sleep outside anymore," she said gently. "You can use the floor." Inside, Ethan blinked, surprised. "Only the floor," she added quickly, cheeks flushing. He smiled a real smile, this time, and nodded. That night, they slept under the same roof for the first time. Not close, but not so far. Over the next few weeks, the routine they built began to feel natural. They cooked together, worked side by side. Sometimes they even laughed, a quiet kind of laughter, that echoed through the house like a secret melody. And one day, while they were harvesting vegetables, a neighbor passed by and said, "You two look like you've been married for years." Lily looked at Ethan, expecting him to laugh or shake his head. But he simply said, "Feels that way sometimes." And for once, she didn't disagree. The days grew warmer, and so did the silence between them. Not the heavy, uncomfortable silence from the beginning, but a soft one, like the calm between raindrops. They moved like a quiet rhythm, understanding each other through glances and gestures. Ethan no longer slept on the porch. He made a small sleeping mat near the window inside, and every night they exchanged a quiet goodnight. Lily began to feel safe. She didn't understand why, but her heart no longer tensed when he walked into the room. Sometimes, she even caught herself waiting for the sound of his footsteps at the door in the evening. She would pretend to be busy when he entered, hiding the way her chest fluttered when their eyes met. One evening, after dinner, Ethan stood on the porch, speaking quietly into his phone. Lily rarely heard him on the phone. There was barely any signal in the village, and when he did make calls, it was always brief. But this night was different. His voice was low, but too intense. The tone was nothing like the quiet, humble Ethan she had grown to know. She stepped closer to the window, curiosity tightening her chest. "I told you not to call here again," he said firmly. "No, I haven't told her. She's not ready. Yes, I'll transfer the money next week." Lily froze. Any money? What money? Her mind raced. Ethan never spoke of money. Never carried it. Never acted like he had it. And yet, his tone was confident, commanding, like someone used to being in control. She stepped away from the window, her heart pounding. All this time, she thought she had come to understand him. His silence. His kindness. His simple way of living. But now, standing in the dark corner of their home, she realized she didn't know him at all. Later that night, he returned inside as if nothing had happened. He smiled at her softly and laid down on his mat. Lily nodded and returned to her bed, but her thoughts swirled like a storm. Who was he talking to? What money was he referring to? And more importantly, who was this man she had married? Sleep escaped her that night. She stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together the puzzle forming in her mind. Memories came rushing back. The subtle quality of his shirt on their wedding day, despite its simple cut. The expensive stitching on his old bag. The way he always had food, even when the market had none. Signs she had ignored. She turned toward him in the dark. His face was peaceful, calm. He looked like the same boy who fixed her sandals and made her soup. But she couldn't unhear his voice from earlier. And now, doubt had planted its roots deep inside her. The man sleeping just a few feet away was no longer a mystery she wanted to ignore. She had to know the truth, even if it broke the fragile peace they had built together. Lily woke up with the weight of the night still pressed against her chest. Ethan had already left, like he always did. She moved through the house, her eyes sharp, searching for answers she hadn't dared to look for before. It wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about truth. She needed to understand who this man really was. The one who mended her shoes, cooked with her in silence. She started with the drawer in the corner, one Ethan rarely used. It was filled with nothing but dried herbs and old buttons. Then the cabinet. Empty. A few shirts. A faded towel. Tucked behind a loose plank near the window, something caught her eye. A leather pouch. She pulled it free, her heart hammering in her ears. Inside was a small, neatly folded cloth. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a stack of photographs and documents. Her breath caught. The first photo was of Ethan, dressed in a sleek black suit, standing beside a luxury car in front of what looked like a grand estate. He was smiling confidently, surrounded by people in designer clothes. It didn't look like him, but it was. Picture after picture revealed the same story. Ethan laughing at a party. Ethan with high-profile businessmen. Ethan in expensive places she had only seen in magazines. Lily felt dizzy. Then came the documents. Bank records, business contracts, and a passport with a name she didn't recognize. Ethan Jinwei Han. She dropped everything onto the bed. Who was this man? Was this life, this wooden house, the farming, the silence, all a lie? That evening, she cooked as usual, but her mind wasn't in the kitchen. When Ethan returned, dusty and tired, he greeted her with the same gentle smile. She looked at him carefully. He looked normal. So normal, it almost made her question everything she had just seen. But she couldn't unsee it. As they sat down to eat, she placed a photo on the table between them. His expression shifted, just for a second, but it was enough. The mask cracked. He placed his spoon down and stared at the photo. Then, slowly, he looked up at her. Their eyes locked. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The silence between them was no longer peaceful. It was loud, heavy, demanding. After a long pause, Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaled deeply, and said quietly, "I was going to tell you. Just, not yet." Lily's voice trembled, but she held her ground. "Who are you, Ethan?" He looked down at his hands. For the first time, he looked unsure of himself. "Someone I tried to leave behind." Lily's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. He wasn't just poor. He wasn't just a mystery. He was a man living two lives. And she was caught between them. That night, they didn't sleep under the same roof. Ethan stayed outside, by choice. Lily lay awake, clutching the photos, replaying every moment they had shared. Was it all a performance? She didn't know. But one thing was certain. This story was far from over. The silence that once connected them had turned into a wall. For days, Ethan and Lily moved through the same house like strangers. They no longer ate together, no longer exchanged quiet glances. The warmth that had slowly grown between them had vanished, replaced by cold uncertainty. Lily couldn't bring herself to speak. The photos, the hidden identity, the money, everything haunted her. How could he pretend to be someone he wasn't? How long had he planned to deceive her? But more than anger, she felt hurt. Because somewhere along the way, she had started to care. Ethan tried to keep the rhythm of their old life. He still brought food, still swept the porch, still left her tea in the morning. But now, she never drank it. She didn't want to pretend. One night, unable to sleep, Lily stood at the window, watching the clouds gather over the fields. The sky was dark, heavy with unshed rain. Then she saw him, sitting by the tree near the edge of the property. Shoulders slumped, staring at the horizon as if searching for forgiveness. Impulsively, she walked outside. The air was cool, the smell of rain thick around them. She stopped a few feet from him. "Why?" she asked softly. He didn't look surprised, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Because I was tired of the other life," he said. "The money, the lies, the expectations. I wanted something real. I didn't expect it to be you. But then, it was..." Lily's heart twisted. "So you hid everything from me?" "At first, yes. Then I was afraid. I thought if you knew the truth, it would all disappear." She laughed bitterly. And now it has, anyway. The first raindrops began to fall, cold against her skin. Ethan stood slowly, stepping closer. Everything I've done since the wedding, it was real. The meals. The quiet moments. Fixing your sandals. Building this life. I meant it all. She shook her head, her eyes glistening. You lied about who you were. How can I believe anything else was true? Because I fell in love with you, Lily. She froze. The words hung in the air between them, heavy like the storm clouds above. Thunder rolled across the hills. Lily stepped back, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. I didn't ask for any of this. Not the marriage, not the secrets. And definitely not your love. Her voice cracked, and with one final look, she turned and walked Alway back toward the house, toward the safety of what little she could still control. Ethan didn't follow. He stood alone in the rain, drenched, heart exposed. That night, Lily locked the door for the first time. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, listening to the rain crash against the roof. Her chest ached, torn between the man who had betrayed her trust and the man who had made her feel seen. Love wasn't supposed to be this confusing, but maybe it always was. Maybe four hearts like theirs, uncertain, full of shadows. Love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a storm. And this storm had only just begun. The days after the confrontation blurred into a quiet, aching haze. Lily stopped waiting for Ethan. She no longer looked for him through the window. But even in silence, she felt his absence like a wound that wouldn't close. He wasn't sleeping outside anymore. Ethan had left early one morning and hadn't returned. Not that day. Not the next. At first, she told herself it didn't matter. That maybe it was better this way. But by the third night, worry grew louder than her pride. Until, in the early morning light of the fourth day, she found him sitting by the riverbank, soaked, eyes bloodshot, with an envelope clutched tightly in his hands. He didn't move as she approached. You shouldn't be here, he murmured. Neither should you, she replied, her voice soft. He looked at her then, and for the first time, he didn't try to smile. He handed her the envelope. Inside were two letters. One was addressed to Lily Hahn. Her eyes widened. You changed my name, she asked, startled. I was going to, he said. Legally, properly. I didn't want this marriage to be a cage. I wanted it to be your choice. The second letter was a will. Ethan's name was signed at the bottom. And listed were several properties, investments, and a business empire that Lily could barely comprehend. Why are you showing me this now? Because I'm tired of hiding, he said. I was born into wealth, groomed to take over my family's legacy. But all I ever wanted was a simple life. When your father came to mine, begging for help, I saw a chance to disappear, to live without expectations, without pressure, just peace. He took a breath. But I didn't expect you. I didn't expect to care. And I definitely didn't expect to fall in love. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. You could have told me. I was afraid you'd leave. And now? He looked at her, no walls left in his gaze. Now I'm afraid I already lost you. The silence returned, but this time it was different. Not sharp or cold, but full of pain and something else. Something like hope. Lily sat beside him, her hands still holding the letters. I don't know what to feel, Lee. You lied. But you also gave me something I never had before. Someone who truly saw me. He looked at her, barely breathing. Then tell me what I can do to fix this. She didn't answer right away. She stared at the river, the way the sunlight danced over the surface. Then, slowly, She folded the letters and placed them back into the envelope. "Take me there," she said finally. He frowned. "Where?" "To your world. I want to see it. All of it. I want to see what you ran from." His eyes widened, unsure if she meant it. But when she turned to him, there was no anger in her face, only strength. "If I'm going to choose this life, I need to know all of it." And for the first time in weeks, Ethan smiled. Not the polite kind, but the real one. Because for the first time, Lily wasn't walking away. She was walking with him. The city buzzed with a life that Lily had never experienced. Glass towers stretched into the sky. Expensive cars glided down wide boulevards. People rushed past in suits, talking on phones, their heels echoing against marble floors. It was a world of wealth, of pressure, of endless motion. And now, she was in the middle of it, holding Ethan's hand. He had brought her there, as promised. Not to impress, but to reveal. Every meeting, every boardroom, every obligation. She watched him transform into someone else when he stepped into his office, confident, commanding, powerful. But this time, there was no mask. He let her see it all. He wasn't hiding anymore. And strangely, she wasn't afraid. She saw the weight he carried on his shoulders. The responsibility, the legacy he never asked for. And she saw something else too. The way he looked at her. When no one else was watching. Like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. That night, they stood on the balcony of his penthouse. Below them, the city glowed like a sea of stars. "This isn't me," he said quietly. "It's just the life I was born into." Lily stepped closer. "And the farm. That was the life I chose." She looked up at him, her voice steady. "Then let's choose together." Ethan turned to her, eyes wide with disbelief. "After everything, you still want this?" She nodded. "I want us, but no more lies. No more secrets. I want love that doesn't wear masks." He didn't answer with words. He kissed her, softly, slowly, like he was asking permission with every breath. And she kissed him back. Weeks passed. Lily didn't return to the village. Not yet. She stayed, learning about Ethan's world. Meeting the people who once dictated his every move. She didn't always fit in, but she didn't have to. Because she wasn't changing who she was. And Ethan wasn't either. They bought a small house on the edge of the city. Quiet, simple, with a garden. Lily could grow things in, and enough space for Ethan to breathe. Sometimes they went back to the village. Sometimes they disappeared from everything, just to be alone, under the stars. They built a new life, not rich, not poor, not forced. Just theirs. And one spring morning, under the same old tree by the river, Ethan knelt down, not as a billionaire, not as a stranger, but as the man who had fallen in love with her when she was just a girl, forced into a marriage she never wanted. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Not because you have to, but because you want to." Lily laughed through tears. "I thought I already did." He smiled. "Let's do it again. For real, this time." She took his hand. There was no ceremony, no crowd. Just them, the wind, and the promise of something honest. Because in a world full of lies, they had found one thing that was true. And this time, it was forever.